What's up, y'all? Bill McNeil rocking the mic again, cold representing Rocket Fuel Malt Liquor. It's got the mad flavor that takes any situation to the next level. So when the party starts bouncing and the ladies start bumping, tighten up your flow with Rocket Fuel. Rocket Fuel Malt Liquor. Damn!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. I promised this earlier. There's been a lot of talk about piracy in comic books. And there was a specific tweet from Erik Larsen that I want to talk about first. It's got a lot of people, I don't know, freaking out a little bit. I even saw someone thinking that this has all been confirmed. And here with me to talk about that is my good friend from the Comics by Perch podcast. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. You know, we're getting along. The baby's doing well, and we're getting used to the new living situation where we have 3 boys. It's been exciting, but we're here to talk about comics. Erik Larsen had a tweet. We're going to talk about that after this, but within a conversation, this is what he had to say. And I think a lot of people are jumping to a lot of conclusions. These companies are floundering and failing. The threat from upstairs is that they'll go to all reprints and stop producing new material. They're doing everything they can to stay alive. If you can't afford it, do without.
Yep. Yeah.
These guys, like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Everyone, you know, the industry's doing great. And then here it's failing.
Well, people hate this take of mine, but the answer is it's always kind of the middle of these extremes. No, the industry is not obviously dying because comics are coming out monthly and things are happening. However, very true, there's not enough money in it. There's not enough security in it. And if you want a good paying job, comics is not the place to go. I mean, so it is a little bit frustrating. I read tweets like this and I was like, see, everything's going great. Look at these bookseller numbers. It's the best it's ever been. Ha. And then we see stuff like this going, hey, piracy is taking food out of our mouths. And the answer is, it's not that complicated. Yeah, the comics industry, particularly if you blow in manga and young adult and Dogman and all that kind of stuff into it, continues to expand. The traditional comics market, what we think of the Western market of Marvel and DC, continues to lower page rates, pay people lower, and that content is suffering. And both things are very true.
And people are seeing this, and they think this is confirmation that DC or Marvel are going to stop printing new comics and they're just going to reprint old stuff.
Well, I think that's silly in the sense that that's been a threat. I mean, honestly,
it's on the table. I'm certain.
We have heard these comment of like, hey, let's just stop printing new comics since Marvel declared bankruptcy in the 90s. That has been a constant rumor in this industry. You can go back and look at the comics newsletters that were out pre-internet and people were making these comments. I'm sure if you went back to the DC implosion in the 70s, people were making these comments as well. But the truth is actually probably a little bit different. It's not that new comics are going to be done and they're just going to reprint old material. I wish, frankly, they would reprint more old material. There's a lot of content out there that would sell that they keep out of print for reasons only known to them. But the reality is, yeah, they're going to produce new comics. They're just going to find ways to produce them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Page rates are falling right now at the big 2, and they're going to continue to fall at the big 2. So they're going to keep putting comics out. They're not going to be paying what they were. And I mean, for a lot of people, why would you put up with that? I would go and do another job.
Well, we did talk about that tweet from Jimmy Palmiotti that said, you need to be asking for raises. I was like, God, maybe if you're James Tynion, if you're going by the Erik Larsen standard here, it sounds like raises might not be on the table. But let's talk about where this came from. Sure. It's a piracy debate. He said on the piracy debate, there is no debate. It's criminal behavior. People are struggling to make a living, and you're taking what they're creating without giving them compensation. There is no justification. I agree with that. You should not be pirating comic books.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's not legal. Yes, you are stealing. But at the end of the day, and this is this funny argument that goes back and forth on piracy constantly. Look, you make the call. You're the person. You decide if you want to take the risk. Go for it. If you're comfortable doing it, it's on you. It isn't the weird part about how people want to deal with piracy is they want to try and make decisions for others, and there are laws. Those are the decisions that have been made. But outside of that, like nothing I say or Erik Larsen says or you say or anybody is going to make people wake up one day and go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize. I will stop. That's not going to happen. So everybody knows. Nobody's under any kind of illusion that it's not legal. Everybody is aware. And, I think if you're a publisher or you're a content creator, it's time to be a lot more pragmatic about it. You need to ask yourself the question, why are people pirating? Is there anything I can do to fix that? And being pissed on Twitter won't do anything.
There's definitely, it feels like there's a disconnect. And I hate to break it to Erik Larsen and other executives within comic books. Everybody's dealing with digital piracy. Movies, television, streaming, books, comic books, any form of entertainment, video games. If you can get a digital copy, people are going to do that. Yep. It's the age that we live in, and you have to offer your product digitally because there is an entire generation of customers that are consuming their products digitally now. You have to learn to deal with it. How are you going to work within this age and make it work with you? I think if people stop pirating comics tomorrow, Erik Larsen and the rest of the comic industry would still be in the same pickle they are in right now. I think piracy is symptomatic of a problem. I don't think it's actually the underlying condition.
Sure. I mean, with piracy, it's funny. I did a video on this, but it will come out weeks from now, so it will look very. You're getting the scoop. I think that with piracy, number one, the people pirating books are not all customers. That's a myth, and music learned this, and entertainment learned this. And if you look at the industries you're talking about, the huge difference right now is music actively changed their business model. They went to track only sales. They went to all you can eat kind of bundles. You had Apple Music, you have Amazon Music, you have all these different services that are designed to provide a different way of consuming the music that will tempt people to pay for it. And it's by and large working. They've been able to make it work. Entertainment, same thing. All these streaming services we're talking about, a lot of them have their roots in Genesis in trying to find a business model that worked in an era of piracy. When you come to comics, though, Shueisha has figured out in Japan, they definitely have changed their business model radically to adopt to piracy, and it is working for them. In the US, however, the Marvel, DC, and kind of the big companies continue to look at piracy and go, I just wish it would stop. Does anybody have like an Infinity Gauntlet around here? I can snap my fingers and just piracy will go away. Who's got the Infinity Gauntlet this week? That's their approach. I think
they think it would fix their problems, and I don't think that it would even make a dent in it. To be honest,
it would not. I don't, because it is a myth that those customers would immediately flow into paying money for comics. They wouldn't. The piracy numbers are high for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest, though, is the biggest pirated books, at least with downloads, is in bundles. People just download everything that came out this week or everything Marvel did. And so some content creators will look at that and go, look, see, my book was downloaded 100,000 times. Like, your book was downloaded as part of everything else. There's a decent chance nobody even read your book. But regardless, that's almost irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's not putting money in your pocket. It's not going to change anything. And the only way to combat this is to get smart, like the entertainment business has done, like games, like music. Comics needs to drag itself out of the 80s in its business model and adapt. And I mean, there is no Infinity Gauntlet to snap it away. You've got to actually, work hard on this. I think the biggest trap about piracy that's happening right now with Marvel and DC in particular is that a decent amount of the audience they are listening to exists on social media, Twitter and Facebook. And as we have seen, those users tend to index higher in pirating books. Countless times you'll see threads where people are complimenting and shouting and demanding something out of a comic. And the companies, the publishers, are largely going along with it or listening to that audience abnormally high, particularly when you consider they're about 5, maybe at the height, 10% of the buying audience. And that audience tends to be the one that pirates the most. So the input you're getting about what to do with your comic are coming from people who aren't buying your comic. And that is a horrible marketing plan.
I mean, the strategies out there, you see things like Batman 3 Jokers, you see like TMNT The Last Road, and you see Berserker. There are many ways to get people excited about your comic book and come in and pay good money and get those orders up. Now, like I said, there was a disconnect. I do want to talk about this last tweet from Ramv, one of my favorite creators. And it's my mind is boggled that he can't get his head around this. This is what he had to say. I can't wrap my head around the affordability argument. I really can't think of anywhere else you could buy 22 pages of painstakingly drawn illustrations plus episodic narrative content as physical objects that you own. Even as a printing of original art, that is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's a terrible way to look at it. That's not how the consuming audience looks at it. Very few people buying and reading comics, and this is coming from a guy who has sold comics for 3 decades to people. The majority of your audience does not come in going, I've got an original piece of art. Because by and large, by the way, they don't. You've got a piece of art that's been printed 100,000 odd times that's compressed down. That's not an original piece of art. That's a mass-produced printed piece of art. And again, that's not how people look at it. They're looking at it as a consumable entertainment product. And I think that statement is a bit baffling. And if you abstract it, I mean, so the people who are painstakingly doing CGI effects and building movies and putting all this material out that ultimately goes on, Netflix or Disney Plus for $6 or $8 a month, that they're worth even less in your mind. I mean, that just it's a silly way to look at it, and it doesn't make sense. And at the end of the day, the market will decide.
I'm a big Ram V fan. If you go back to his Future State Swamp Thing, in 2 issues, he tells an amazing story. It envelops you in it. The art by Perkins is fantastic. And I came away completely satisfied after 2 issues. And here's an issue. We're on issue 3 or 4 of Swamp Thing in his 10-issue miniseries. The first 2 issues, nothing happens. All these stories are drawn out. They're decompressed. They're so long. You're not buying a 22-page story. In this case, with his Swamp Thing, you're buying them in 1/10 increments. It's going to be one long-ass 220-page story. So it's not a $5 story. It's a $50 story. And when you compare that to a novel that you could probably get for $5, or you could get, 5 months of Netflix subscription, or you could get a video game for those prices, you can see why maybe it isn't quite it's just not a really good value for your money. The way that they decompressed everything. The shortest stories you see in comics nowadays are like 4 issues. So at a minimum, You're going to be paying like $16 to $20 just for one story. Yeah,
it's a very strange way to look at it. I'm sorry, and I think that people who work in comics should have pride in their work. 100%. You should be proud of what you've done, and you should try and do the very best you can. But that doesn't mean that your pride equals the amount of money the market will pay for it. That's not how the world works. There's a lot of people who are proud about buildings they build, or medical equipment that they put together, or software they write, or whatever else. There's a lot of things people feel pride in. That your pride does not translate into financial market value. So, like you say, there's these stories are drawn out and decompressed. By that logic, if we're using an original artwork, what about pages in comics Bendis writes where you just get a page full of text and no art? Is that worth less? Should the comic be, $3.20 for Bendis books because you're getting less original art?
Or a Hickman book where you get multiple pages of graphic illustrations that aren't hand drawn. It's just text. Sure.
That's a very strange slope to go down, and it's an irrelevant one. Look, the market is deciding that $5 a month for a book that is decompressed is expensive, and it is. It's
2 comics a week, 8 comics a month, a minimum $4, $32 for not even a complete story. It is a lot of money. It's not a good value in comparison to other things that are competing on the market.
It's in the eye of the beholder. If you are really thrilled with your purchase, if you believe that you're getting some collector value out of it, all the rest, then that's awesome. You've decided that that's valuable to you. Cool. But just in terms of the raw stats of these books, yes, it's expensive. And to try and kind of pretend it's not expensive is, again, it's dangerous. Because that's the stuff that sends the industry off a cliff. And in Japan, we've seen other tweets this week with people working insane hours and very long to produce stuff. Inhuman hours I wouldn't do to produce comics, to produce manga. And a lot of that stuff's going into a $2 a month unlimited digital app. for everything. So are those people, is their work less valuable? Is their work somehow less meaningful than in the US? That's a strange way to look at things.
Yeah. So the idea that you can just, I dream a genie and just blink all this stuff away. Piracy isn't going anywhere, unfortunately. You need to deal with the environment that you're in. You've seen other forms of entertainment have adapted to the environment, and they're still there. Maybe they're not quite as strong as they were prior, but just to sit there and stomp your feet and act like piracy is the only reason that there's a problem in comic books is absolutely insane. But I do think that an executive like Erik Larsen, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Either comic books are strong or they're dying. You can't say both.
I agree. And maybe you shouldn't say those extreme things in the first place. Don't say comic books are about to collapse. Oh my God, the sky is falling. And don't say it's the best it's ever been, because both those are stupid statements. And people know better. But it is all a bit ridiculous. I do wish, in particular in the West, people would stop with the arguments and the panic and the pearl clutching or whatever it happens to be around piracy, and they need to get to solutions. Other industries have gotten there. I mean, man, people in the music industry were so pissed. I'm sure you remember seeing those articles from like Lars from Metallica being really angry and over the top. Yes, everybody was mad, and it was a horrible problem. And at one point, people sat down, rolled up their sleeves, and said, "Look, our rage and our kind of trying to shame the buying audience is not working. So we probably should actually come up with a solution." And they did, and they have been successful in that. At some point, comic books has to put in the work to do the same. Now, the great news for them is the other regions, France, Europe, South America, and Japan and Korea, have largely done all the work. At this point, you just need to amalgamate the model that works for the US and go with it.
Absolutely. Well, Perch, I do want to say thank you very much for talking about this. It's been in the news. I wanted to get your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.